All right, class, today we're going to talk about sewing machine parts. It looks like most of you haven't sewn before, so we're just going to start at the very beginning, which is good because that's the point of this class. So first off, here is your bobbin door. I'm going to be going in order of your worksheet, so make sure that you're right along with me and that you fill in the answers exactly as I tell them to you because you will have a quiz on this, and you don't want to not have that as a tool to study for it. Okay? So, like I said, first is going to be your bobbin door. Okay? Second, and this is a piece that's technically separate from the machine, this is your bobbin case. It's going to go inside the bobbin door with we're going to jump out of order for just a second here. Excuse me. Actually, I don't think that the actual bobbin is on your worksheet. So the bobbin goes inside of the bobbin case and both go in here. It doesn't just go in straight like that. We'll talk about how to thread the machine next time, but for today we're just going through parts. So we've done numbers 1 and 2. Number 3 is right here. It's your stitch plate. Go ahead and see if you can find it on your machine, and see if you can read the little numbers that are at the front of the stitch plate. Okay? If you can find the 5/8 inch line, each of these lines are generally 1/8 of an inch. There's a section of lines on the front and a section of lines on the back. Only pay attention to the ones in the front because these are in the English system and the ones on the back are in metric. So the lines on the front, the most common one that you're going to follow is the 5/8 of an inch. Okay? If I don't specify otherwise, assume that you're using your 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. The other most common one that you guys will be using is 1/4 of an inch, which is this little itty bitty line that's just barely inside the presser foot. But since you guys are beginners, we generally just let you follow the edge of the presser foot because that's a lot easier. Alrighty, so number 4 is your feed dogs. If you turn your hand wheel, which is number 23, you'll see that they go up and down. Okay? So, go ahead and do that on your machine a couple times just so that you can watch the feed dogs. What these do is they pull the fabric through the machine. So, the presser foot, which is number 5, holds the fabric down and the feed dogs push it through. Alrighty? So, with the presser foot, it's important to know that you can change out the presser foot. Find on your machine there's a little lever that's right behind the presser foot. Go ahead and pick it up and take off the foot. Okay? You'll see that where you left it, there's a little cone, a little upside down cone, and right there is where you put this hole on the presser foot to put it back on. Okay? And there's a lot of different kinds of presser feet. We have a buttonhole presser foot, we have a zipper presser foot, we have an overlock presser foot, we have a blind hem presser foot, and this one is the one that you will be using most of the time. You'll know because it has a number 1 on it. And I will tell you for all of the other presser feet that you need whenever you need to change them out. Okay? So number 6 is right here. It's your needle. Okay? And then number 7 is the needle clamp. So we're going to show you how to take out and change a needle then, because that's kind of an important skill. So there's this black thing right here. It's a little screw. Okay? You turn it towards you and then hold on to the needle, and then you'll be able to pull it out. Okay? After you pull out your needle, you'll want to pay attention and notice that the front of the needle, the front of the shaft, is rounded, and the back of the shaft is flat. Okay? Now, this lower part of the needle down here, on the back, there's a little groove. Okay? And on the front, there's actually also a groove down the center. The back groove, though, is only around the eye of the needle. And if you look really closely at your own needle, you'll be able to see that. If your machine isn't working for whatever reason and you don't know what it is, there are 3 steps to guess what it is. The first step is that you turn the machine off and turn it back on again. About 60% of the time, that's what your problem is. About 30% of the time, you need to do is just rethread the machine. And like I said, we're going to talk about threading the machine next time, so don't worry about it yet. But the other 10%, or probably about 9 of the other 10%, is that your needle is broken. Okay? And basically what you need to do, if you've tried the other two things, you've tried turning it on and off again, you've tried rethreading it, and it's still not working and you're not sure why, pull out your needle and look at the very tip of it. Okay? Now, with the needles that we use in these machines, for most of our projects, they're called universal needles. And what those are is they have a slightly rounded tip, only slightly, just a little bit. But, so you don't want the tip to be super, super pointy, but if it's broken, or if it's not as long as it looks like it should be, you know you need to change the needle, because that's what your problem is. So, when I'm putting the needle back in, I'm going to put the flat part of the shank, or the shaft, you can call it either one, to the back. Okay, so that it's facing away from me. And then I just tighten this screw back up, right how I had it before, and there we go. Needle is back in. Alrighty, so that was 6 and 7. Now, number 8 is your thread guides, okay? There are several thread guides on your machine. The first one is a hook on the back of your machine. Okay, guys, find the hook on the back of your machine. And then once you found that, you're going to want to find the thread guides that are right here for your needle. Okay? Since we all have a little bit different machines, they're all almost like this, but since the machines are of different ages and slightly different eras, you're going to have a little bit different configuration as far as which thread guides you have down here. But most of you will have 2 thread guides, and what those do is they help the tension work properly so that the thread goes into the needle correctly. Alrighty? So, after number 8, which was your thread guide, is number 9, which is your backstitch button. Okay? Your backstitch button is a U-turn arrow. Okay? And there are a couple of different, it's the button that has a U-turn arrow on it. Sorry, there's another U-turn arrow elsewhere on the machine. But there are 2 different ways that you can use the backstitch button. One is you can hold the backstitch button while you're stitching, and then it'll sew backwards instead of forwards. Another thing you can do is you can hold the button down or press it twice, depending on which kind of machine you have, and either way, it'll beep. And once it beeps, there will be a little U-turn arrow on your computer screen here, and that'll tell you that you're stitching backwards and you don't have to hold the button down while you're sewing. And to take it off, all you do is you press that button again or you hold it down again, just depending on your machine. And again, it will beep and it'll let you know. So, number 10 is the needle up, needle down button. And that's right here. It's in a little bit of a different place on every machine, but the way that you know what it is it has a picture of the eye of a needle, and it has an up arrow and a down arrow right next to it. And what this does is it determines where your needle will stop once you've reached the end of a row of stitching. So basically, what it does is once I've taken my foot off of the foot pedal, if it's in the needle up position, then the needle will stop up out of my fabric. And if it's in the down position, it'll stop down in my fabric. Now, most of the time, it's fine to just have it up, but whenever you're going to pivot a corner, like when you're going to sew your pillowcases or your drawstring backpacks, you're going to want it to be on the down position so that then you can just turn the fabric instead of having the needle up and you can accidentally move the fabric all over the place. Alrighty? So, number 11 is your half speed button. Alright? Not all machines have this. On the more advanced machines, we have a slider bar instead, but on your machine, on the worksheet, there's a half speed button, which kind of has a picture of a knot on it, and it's generally right next to your needle up, needle down button. Alrighty? Number 12 is the end of design button, and it's right here. Okay, and what that does is if you're using a specialty decorative type stitch and you don't want it to stop in the middle of your flower. You don't want to accidentally pick up your foot and, have the machine stop in the middle of something. What you do is you can push this button, and if you press it once, then it'll stop at the end of whatever stitch you're working on. If you press it twice, then it'll only let you do one stitch. If you press it 3 times, it'll only let you do 2 stitches, and it has a computer icon on the computer screen as well, and it'll tell you exactly what it is, how many stitches it'll let you go before it'll just stop. That's also very useful if you're kind of worried about how long you keep your foot down. And so if you know that you're really close to the edge of your corner, you can stop and then you can press that button a couple of times and it'll only let you go 2 stitches. And that's very helpful if you're working on, especially with decorative stitches like you'll be using on your hot pads. All right? Number 13 is your take-up lever. Again, if I turn my hand wheel, there's this little lever that bobs up and down behind this guard right there. Okay? Go ahead and do that on your machines to see if you can see it moving up and down. But what that does is that's what takes your thread up and down. That's what makes it so that your stitches form every time. Alrighty? Number 14 is the thread hook, which I kind of already mentioned as a thread guide. You can call it either one. I'm not going to be too specific on your quiz. Mostly I just want you to know that there are multiple locations of thread guides. And so as long as you know that, that's what you need to know for the test. Number 15 is your computer screen right here. Okay? Computer screen, that's all it is. It'll have a display of the kind of stitch that you're doing, the length of the stitch that you're doing, the width of the stitch that you're doing, and any other functions that you've pressed, so that you can always look at it and you can know exactly what your machine is going to do. All right? Number 16 is your stitch length buttons. There's these up and down arrows on either side of a dotted line. All right? And what that does is if you press the up arrow however many times, it'll make a longer stitch. And if you press the down arrow however many times, it'll make a shorter stitch. And your computer screen here will display what length of stitch it is so that you can know. The standard stitch length on these machines is 2.4, and what that is 2.4 millimeters. That's what you're going to use 90% of the time when you're sewing, and and I'll let you know if you need to change the stitch length for any reason. All right? Number 17 is your needle position button. That's right above your stitch length button, and it has a picture of an eye of a needle and a little oval with a dot in the middle of it, and it has side-to-side arrows. And what that does is it changes where your needle is coming down. So if this is my stitch plate right here, I can move the needle over either direction. And what that does that's helpful is sometimes you want to stitch a little bit, like just a little bit smaller than 5/8 of an inch. And so what you do is you move the needle towards your seam allowance, and you get just a little bit smaller than that. That way, if you're trying to keep any stitching hidden for when you do your finished product, it's a lot easier to do that than it is to try to follow like halfway between the 5/8 line and the 1/2 line. All right? The next one is your stitch width buttons. And again, we have side-to-side arrows, but this one has a zigzag running down the middle. This increases or decreases your stitch width, okay? And your stitch width mostly has an effect on your zigzag stitches and things like that, but what it does is it just makes it wider. That'll be something that, like I said, you'll mostly use on zigzag stitches, but again, I'll let you know if you need to change that from the default settings. So obviously the default setting on a straight stitch is 0, which I probably should have mentioned. The next one is 19. It's your spool pin. You'll notice I have a spool of thread here on mine. You have a vertical spool pin and a horizontal spool pin. Okay? Go ahead and find those on your machine. Some of you guys, the vertical spool pin might be down, and all that you do, it's kind of a swiping motion where you grab it from the back of the machine and flip it up, okay? The next one, number 20, is your bobbin winder, okay? That's right over here. So what I do is I'm going to thread my machine in the special way that you do to wind a bobbin, and then the bobbin goes on this little pin right here, and I flick this switch in. And what that does is now instead of when I push my foot pedal down, instead of the machine sewing, it's going to wind a bobbin. And the bobbin is what we mentioned earlier that goes in here. Also, if you turn your machine on and it won't sew and you don't know why, and it's making a bit of a whirring noise, probably someone left it flipped in, and you just need to flip it back out and it'll work just fine. Number 21 is all of these buttons right here, okay?